Traffic lights aren't broken, they're doing exactly what they are designed to do. The question is, who are they designed for? In this episode, we look at the technology that controls intersections, why pedestrians often get a poorer deal, and why the next generation of traffic signals could transform the way we move around our cities. This is Streets and People, conversations about people and projects shaping how we move. Find us at getaroundcaboolture.au. Today we're doing one of our People and Projects episodes, and I'm here in the studio with Christian Chong-White, who I know from the professional social media platform when he did some super exciting, riveting posts about traffic signals, which sounds like a contradiction in terms, and it's like everything in transport. When you're on the outside, you think this is so boring and why would you bother? And then you get in there and you go, this is actually really fun and complex and thought-provoking and so much more engaging and intellectually stimulating than you could possibly ever imagine. I'm here on Gubbi Gubbi country in Queensland in Caboolture. And Christian, whereabouts are you calling from?
I'm in Sydney on the North Shore.
What made you interested in traffic lights, and why does it still matter to you today?
My early career, I didn't start in traffic signals or even in the road sector. Further back, I was in the electricity market, and I was actually working in America at the time, and I came back with my partner at the time, my wife, and applied for jobs. And then there was a job that was advertised, the traffic algorithm development manager, that caught my eye, and I applied for it. I'd basically worked with control systems in the electricity market, building actually the electricity market in Australia before then, controlling generators, controlling traffic. It's a similar sort of thing. And the person who interviewed me was one of the original inventors of the SCATS, Sydney Coordinated Adaptive Traffic System. It was very special to get this opportunity because it was pretty unique, and I was captivated to be working in the background and have such an influence on a traffic signal system that's sold all around the world and used in very different places.
And so you came not from a transport lens, you came from an electricity lens. So that different perspective, how did that influence the way that you understood transport and signalling and seeing everything as a system?
I still consider myself to be a newbie at traffic signals, even though I've been working for more than 2 decades here and working in a very specialised area and working with really knowledgeable people who have unique knowledge. But I've always prided myself of looking at it with fresh eyes because of this. And actually, the person who employed me, who was the late Peter Larry, he said he wanted to bring fresh eyes to the problem. And that's one of the reasons why, because of my background, I was brought into it. I think there's a lot of challenges for change. And so I've always tried to keep myself in my mind fresh to turn around and go, yeah, this might be the way it's working. And this might be the way I've always experienced it just as a layperson in Australia. But to try to have fresh eyes to think, how could we do it differently? I've been lucky enough to travel around the world to look at how things are done differently, but also just picture a whole new way of doing things as well.
You started off in electricity and then you thought, okay, I'll give it a go. Why does it still matter to you today?
Traffic signals are something that is very close to everybody's experience of how they travel through cities and towns and countries. Country towns big enough to have traffic signals. My kids, when they were younger in primary school, and they had to travel through traffic signal intersections to get to school. As a parent, I had a lot of concerns and fears for their experience, and I wanted them to be able to walk to school. I ride a bike to work these days, and I've done that for many years. And I ride through intersections. My background is I'm the gatekeeper, if you like. That's probably not the right word, but let me go with that. Of the algorithms, I understand the algorithms of how the system works and how it sees with sensors and all the rest of it. And so I care very deeply that it works good for everybody who uses it. And I can see the weaknesses and they frustrate me. And I think, how can we make all this better to work better so that the automation works better for the people out there?
So let's talk about pedestrians, because I am a pedestrian a lot of the time. Actually, I'm not really a pedestrian. I'm often on my bike, but there are no bike lanes in Caboolture. And I understand you're a little bit familiar with Caboolture. It's on the outskirts of Brisbane.
I've actually done some work in that area.
So one of the really frustrating things is how little time we have with the little green man.
First of all, I have a huge amount of sympathy for people who challenge and criticise the pedestrian experience and cyclist experience as well versus vehicles. It's been a big focus of my work previously, and it's something that I still always are trying to advance and improve. That's a choice that in Australia we have the green man, the walk, and then we have the clearance, which is the flashing red man, a red person, and then you have the don't walk. And those periods are generally pre-configured. They can be configured as fixed time parts. Often the walk is a fixed time, but it also can be adaptive to extend with the other movements in the phases. If there's a vehicle movement, so you've got, let's just think of the main road, and then you've got the pedestrians on either side, and let's say they're both demanded and those walks are running, they can be a fixed time, and that's an engineering choice, or they could be allowed to stretch, if I could say it like that, with the length of the vehicle phase that runs in parallel. That's a choice.
I really like this idea of the scramble crossing. So I don't know if that's a proper technical term, but it's what it's always referred to in whatever I see. So you can describe a scramble crossing.
Yeah, so scramble crossing, it's also called other names as well. A barn dance, which is another name that I find a bit weird. I prefer the scramble crossing. A conventional pedestrian crossing is that you have a single movement. It's actually two movements. People can walk in one direction on the crossing and can walk on the other direction, but it's across the one road. Whereas with a scramble crossing, which is chiefly done on a cross intersection, it allows all pedestrian movements, including the diagonals, to walk. So it gives the whole conflict area within the intersection area over to pedestrians. I travel through one every day on my bike when I travel to the office. They are great, particularly when the intersection is used by lots of different people. It's not the volume of demand, it's that at the current time there's individuals wanting to walk in all different directions, so they don't have to do the two trips of crossing one leg of the intersection and then another leg of the intersection. They can walk diagonally across.
Brisbane often has a lot in the CBD kind of area, and I look at quite dangerous streets, like our big high volume streets, which are Transport and Main Roads assets. Some of them are so dangerous the way they are, and I often wonder, how bad could it be to put a scramble crossing on those intersections to make it safe in more urban areas? There's one outside the pool here in Caboolture. I just think, gee, that would be good to have a better experience.
So why don't they do that? They don't do that because of trying to make the intersection more efficient for vehicles. With a scrambled crossing, nobody else can use the intersection except for the pedestrians in all the directions. With a single pedestrian movement in both direction, you can then let other movements go on. Let's just take the edge case of a single pedestrian at the intersection at that time, and they press a button and they are only going to use one movement because they're only one person. That's all they can do at one time. That allows the freedom of the intersection to then allow the other movements that don't conflict with that movement to run as well. So that gives the intersection the optimization algorithm, if you like, the full flexibility to optimize it. It's common at that intersection, like in CBD areas or busy country towns in the centre, where there's lots of pedestrians moving in all directions. Suddenly, you can turn around and say it's actually optimal to allow them all to cross at one time, because that's an optimal use of that area. So that sort of gravitates to be used in that context.
I look at it from a safety perspective rather than an efficiency perspective, because at the end of the day, if it's unsafe, it's inefficient. And maybe we can speak to that tension: safety for pedestrians and efficiency for vehicles.
That's a really important point about the safety and efficiency. One of the frustrations I have with traffic signals and pedestrians is that I think inefficiency encourages unsafe behaviour. When pedestrians get a bad service, a bad go, that the intersection makes them wait for a long time, that encourages them to cross unsafely. So I do believe in my heart that efficiency and safety are the same thing. The whole purpose of an intersection is to provide safety. So that's the primary reason. Is a scrambled crossing more safer? Yeah, I probably would struggle with that argument. I'm happy to hear a challenge of why you would think that, because maybe I can't see it. I would probably say from a behavioural point of view, a scrambled crossing is giving the ultimate freedom, and it is giving the whole area to the pedestrians. One of the things that really annoys me, and it's something that in this stage of my career, I've become really passionate about is that allowing intersections vehicles to filter through pedestrians. I think that is don't want to say an unsafe practice, but it is certainly a practice that is higher risk to pedestrians. A scrambled crossing that's provided without filtering through. So I've just basically talked against what I said before. A scrambled crossing does provide more safety because it disallows the traffic engineer to allow filtering of vehicles through the pedestrians.
Ambiguity and frustration are the two big problems. That's what strikes to me about the whole conversation about traffic signals. There are different models. For instance, I've heard that in the Netherlands, they have really good systems which are really great for bicycles, obviously in the Netherlands, but pedestrians as well. But it sort of puts cars more equal with other road users as opposed to giving cars, like usual, A-grade infrastructure and everybody else gets F-grade infrastructure. That's the way that I see it.
Could I say some of the differences of the service quality between bicycles and pedestrians across all the states and basically every intersection in Australia? One of the unique things in Australia is the vehicle detection technology and scale of that deployment of that technology across Australia is pretty incredible. These days a lot of other countries have caught up, but from probably the mid-70s, there was a huge investment in detection technology to improve the traffic signals and the adaptation. And the backstory to that is that in Australia, we didn't have the money to build big freeways like they did in the US. And so we needed the arterial roads to work better for vehicles, I must say. Vehicles are easier to measure because they're big blocks of metal. At the stop line, pretty much across Australia, there's a detector in the road, which is like a metal detector looking upwards. And it basically says there's a big block of metal above me or not. The measurement capability that's at intersections is profound for vehicles. It's, highly measured. If we flip this over to pedestrians, we have the humble pedestrian button on there. And the pedestrian button is just basically you press the button and it knows that there's a demand for the pedestrian. It doesn't know whether there's one pedestrian or 50 pedestrians. It only knows that there's a demand. And so compared to vehicles, the number of vehicles is counted, how long the vehicle has waited on the detector is known. And so in terms of congestion and the number and the extent of the demand for vehicles, this is known by the traffic signal system and that is considered in the optimization. Whereas when you cross over to pedestrians, it's just a very simple knowledge of, hey, it's demanded, I'll give a service or I won't give a service. One of the frustrations I have is that difference in the sensor technology has an impact on the service quality. And so in a CBD, when you see during peak times of people walking, there's huge amounts of people on the street. And basically, often the traffic signals will work the same way, whether there's one person, whether there's a lot of people. Sometimes in the CBD, they will switch the demand to be permanent demand for the pedestrians. And that's sensible when there's a lot of people, but also that can have a disbenefit because if you don't have a scrambled crossing and you have individual arms, if nobody is using a pedestrian crossing and it runs and you're a pedestrian wanting to use another movement, you are disadvantaged just as the vehicles are because of that as well. So I always sort of go back that detection technology is such an important thing because inside the traffic signal system, it doesn't know about vehicles and pedestrians. It just knows services and demand. And so it's a bit like voting. The poor old pedestrian just has one vote. No matter if there's many pedestrians, the group of pedestrians just get one vote, whereas vehicles get lots of votes in the signal system, and that allows the adaptation to work better. That's one example.
I was thinking about, so basically it's a gerrymandered system.
You could look on it like that. These days, there's a lot better detection technology. There's LiDAR, there's vision systems, there's radar, there's infrared. All of them have their pros and cons, but they can detect pedestrians and cyclists. But I think the traffic signals out there are playing catch up. That requires an investment to bring that technology in there. The technology for vehicles was done historically at a huge scale across Australia, but we haven't followed that path yet to that extent for pedestrians.
So pedestrian deaths are on the increase. It's a lot to do with vehicle size, apart from anything else. We know that intersections are very vulnerable places for people who walk. I personally have experienced a few near collisions, no two ways about that. What are the changes that are coming? Is there more interest with traffic signals pedestrians now that pedestrian deaths are increasing? Is that part of the conversation?
I don't work with traffic signal safety myself, so I'm not an expert to talk to the exact side of it. I would just say that as somebody working in the industry, I am very aware there's a big focus on active transport, for example, and thinking about place more versus movement, whereas historically in Australia it's been about movement, pushing cars and throughput. There is a lot of talk about the challenges of pedestrian safety and road deaths and having a safe system. So I think as an industry, there is a lot of pressure and a lot of change. And in the course of my career in traffic signals, yeah, I can see that the volume's been turned up on that. I certainly feel the pressure of the community and the stakeholders to see that intersections should do more and respond more and work differently for the environment that they're put in. If they're put in a place of where there is lots of people or next to a school or in a place where there's lots of tourists, why should that intersection work the same as if it's in a road in a regional area where there's no pedestrians? So I do think industry is trying to change, and there is a lot of change, but it's hard to change a big ship.
And so there are changes coming. Obviously, everyone keeps talking about AI. Presumably, there's something happening there. Are there any projects that might be in our midst which are being talked about or being trialled, particularly here in the outskirts where we've been pretty much neglected? We're a poor area. And so we're very keen to have better pedestrian crossings because it's so terrible at the moment.
Pedestrian crossings are a very simple intersection because you basically have two movements. You have the pedestrian crossing and then you have the vehicle movement, which is often two-way. In Queensland, for example, they are trialling different sensor technologies that measure pedestrians. And going back to the point you called out earlier about elderly people and kids using crossings and the shortness of the walk time, there are road authorities out there, including in Queensland, trialling detection technologies that if there's still a pedestrians walking across there when it would otherwise the pedestrian time be stopped, it measures the pedestrian and it extends the walk time. That is certainly done. Adelaide, for example, on the main arterial roads has this. They have, I think, their infrared sensors looking down on the crosswalks. And so they measure that technology. In New South Wales, we have an Opal card that you tag on and tag off to use the ferries and buses and trains and so forth. They have a card in Singapore that you can go up to the pedestrian button and press it. And that's given to elderly people. Presume you have to show that you're elderly and prove that you can get one of these cards. But that then tells the traffic signal system to change the crossing time to better accommodate them. So that's one that working. They're two very simple examples, but I know there's change that's happening in Australia. We're trialling different types of traffic control that's more like the European models, that is a lot more flexible services for anybody, but it works very well for bicycles and pedestrians because historically in Australia, like we talked about earlier, they've got a lesser deal than what vehicles have. In Australia, we have what's called phase control. A phase in traffic signals is that you might have an intersection that's, let's just say, a three-phase intersection. So the traffic engineer that sets up the intersection, a phase runs a set of movements that's pre-configured. All those movements can't conflict. They can be green at the same time, and that's a choice. So a very simple case might be a two-phase intersection where you have a crossroad, the main road runs, and so the traffic north and south can run, and the pedestrians north and south can run, and then east-west, the traffic can run, and the pedestrians can run. And it gets more complicated when there's suddenly right turn controlled movements and there's left turn, and you can have a more complex phasing than I just described. For the traffic control system, this simplifies the problem because instead of controlling the individual movements, it just controls the phases. Normally they're set as letters, A phase and B phase. The problem with that, though, is that it cuts down the amount of optimization that can happen. I'm sure that you felt that as a pedestrian, a cyclist or a driver, where you've come up to the intersection and you've pressed the button and you've gone, hang on, nobody else is using a movement that crosses my movement. Why don't I get my walk or my green? And in Australia, that is often because it has to call the phase. And so the phase has a bunch of mates, if I could say it like that, of other movements that need to run as well. A real clear case is that, have you ever walked up to an intersection as a pedestrian and pressed the button and then seen, and there's been nobody on the parallel vehicle movement, and the green hasn't come up, the walk hasn't come up for you, and suddenly it's shut down the main road and basically done a cycle to then bring up your walk. There's a couple of reasons for that. There's a safety reason, which I'll just leave to the side at the moment, but it's a phase movement. It's got to go around to come back to the phase. Now, there's a different type of control that's used, particularly in Europe, but it's spread across the world. It's called different names: signal group control, signal-based control, or I prefer movement control. And the reason why I prefer movement control, because the individual movements are controlled. So if you think about it, the controller's just sitting there. Hey, this movement is demanded. Hey, does it conflict with anything? I can bring it on. Whereas in Australia, it says, this movement is demanded, I need to bring the phase on. And so it limits the amount of optimization. So if you look online on social media with videos and you have a look at some pedestrian intersections running in Norway, Scandinavia, you'll see some really amazing things with bicycle movements where, whoa, there's bicycle movements and there's just bikes just going through the intersection and they're obeying the signals, and the signals are being very responsive to the demands of what's going on. And they can do that because they use movement control, that the atom of control is the movement level. And so this is being trialled at the moment in Australia, and I've done some advice work and also some performance assessment work in preparation to trial it. And this, once it starts getting use in Australia, this will allow the intersection to better respond to all the different demands that intersections are getting these days for bicycles and pedestrians and movements, as well as vehicles, which was always the case. Yeah, pretty exciting stuff.
So in Queensland, we have 12 TMR divisions. Are those algorithms set by the different divisions, or are they set by head office?
In Australia, different states have different ways of doing it. It's fairly unique in the world that we generally have a state road authority. In TMR, there's the road authority, but Queensland is different again, that the councils have a lot of power to control their intersections, whereas in New South Wales, where I'm in Sydney at the moment, the councils don't have a lot of control over the intersections. It's the road authority that basically controls and manages it on behalf of the individual councils. So it depends on where you are. It's set at a very high network level, generally, I would say, in Australia. Yeah. But in your area, in Queensland, the council has a lot of power to set it up the way they want it, I believe. Yeah.
I am aware that road agencies are starting to look at more consistency no matter where you are. So I think they're looking much more at harmonisation, because it becomes very confusing for drivers and users. So if I am a mum and I sit there and I'm complaining with my mum friends, and we've all got our little kids, this is my friend, and we're sitting there going, that intersection is really terrible. It's right next to the primary school where the kids go. Really unsafe, and it needs an assessment, and could it get a traffic signal? How would she be able to go around doing that?
I work for a company called Newcon, which we do consulting services. Previously, I worked for the Road Authority. Now it's called Transport for New South Wales. When I worked there, I worked with the section that looked after and was responsible for the traffic signal systems. Huge respect for those people, because they have a huge burden on their shoulders of the responsibility. I always say to people that they're the ones that rock up to the coronial inquiry if someone gets killed at the intersection. I have huge respect for them. I've never had that responsibility as the first person. I've always worked on the algorithms. But I'm also aware that a big part of their job is responding to the public, people that write in. It's a huge part of their job, and it's a huge way that they understand what needs to be done and what prioritises their work. I would say even more than probably what the numbers that come out of the traffic control system in terms of the performance, it is actually the public that writing in and ringing them up and the hotlines. And so I really encourage everybody who feels passionate about it. If there's a safety issue, do not wait at all, ring up straight away. I go back to my comment earlier about talking at barbecues, and as somebody who understands the way the algorithms work in there, I'm always interested to hear the layperson, if I could say it, in there who experienced the system and has complaints and challenges from it, because we all understand it. We all have an expectation of the system. We all can go there and see when something is wrong and when something is unsafe. And so if you have that feeling, then act on it straight away and write in there. I've seen it work. I've had friends when my kids were younger at a daycare centre, and they came to me and asked the same question, and I said, do this. And I saw it go in from the outside. I saw it make a difference on the inside, standing back and seeing it. And I saw the change that what got done from there. That's the power of what you have, just as somebody being able to put in there, call out something that you think is wrong.
You've inspired me, because there's a couple of letters. The problem is that they see a letter from me and they go, oh, here she goes again. That's my problem. I've written so many letters because so few people write letters, and I just really wish people would.
But if you write the letter and you make it evidence-based, and also I think from an efficiency point of view, if you go to an intersection and you're there and it's really busy across the road, there's lots and lots of vehicles going across. And let me just talk from a vehicle point of view. You're in your car, you come up to the side street, it's very busy on the main road, and you wait a long time, and you know you're one and there's lots on the main road. You have an intuitive understanding that I expect to wait a long time because I'm only one and they're many. From an efficiency point of view, if you think about that, but you still sense a feeling of unfairness that's way bigger than that ratio of the balances of demand, then you should feel passionate about calling that out. And if you include that in the story and make the person at the other end in the traffic signal department understand that perspective, that's the way to help change to happen. Rather than just go, I went there to the intersection and I stood for 10 minutes yesterday and that was really bad. That's not giving them the full understanding that if you go, hang on, every day I go there and this and I experience this and I wait there and it's just blah, 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 you can help them because they will respond.
There is one intersection I'm thinking of, and it's such a dangerous intersection, and the police have complained, the highway patrol have complained, a lot of people have complained, and the division is unresponsive. We're also about to get a whole lot of work done in the whole area. Maybe it's to do with that. Yeah, so it's a mixed bag, depends on who's reading it, depends on the division responding, all that. So if somebody's junior at council, they would really like better traffic signals, or say they work in the division and they see that nothing is happening with a particular intersection which is really dangerous, and they know it's a problem, but further up they go, yeah, but in 3 years' time we're going to be resolving that because we've got XYZ project happening, and so in the meantime we'll just ignore it. What do you suggest is something that they could do?
Why doesn't change happen in that sort of situation? Let me talk on first person point of view. So the previous house that I lived on when my kids were young, there was a very busy road in Sydney between us and the primary school. For my kids to walk to school, they had to cross just this one intersection on a very busy state road. It's something that I think of now and again. I sit there and I think back, what could have been done to ease my concern as a parent? And I struggle. It's a whole land use issue. The road is there. It's a state road. People go to work and they use their cars, and a heck of a lot of buses and public transport use that. For people to earn the income and feed their kids and live their life and all the rest of it, there was probably no easy solution. The intersection, there was what's called protected movements, so that the movements were all signalised, the left turns were signalised, there was red arrows to stop vehicles crossing through pedestrians. I would say that there was filtering, that the red arrow dropped and then the vehicles filtered through pedestrians. So I would say that's probably an aspect of where that intersection could get improved. But there were limits to what reasonably could happen without changing the whole land use of the area. So that's the struggle of it, massive change. You need civil infrastructure work to do major works. So sometimes what can be changed in a short term is hard. How can somebody as a professional working in an industry create change? Maybe can I just talk to that? I think sometimes you've just got to chip away at it. You've got to hold your passion. You've got to find what are the little things that we can change, and think of the standards and call them out and say, how can we do things better? Don't see the way things are always done and accept it. Turn around and go, given the tools that we have in the guidelines, what does that mean for this particular site? Every site is different. The thing with traffic signals is that every site is a function of the local demands, the geography, even the nature of, it might be a stream and there's a bridge. It might be that the trees that have been planted there obscure the area, and that's a challenge for vehicles to be able to see it, so the limit is different. It might be that this is a long way away from urban centres. It might be this is in the middle of an urban centre and then there's a school next door. And so all that comes to play, and that all needs to be thought about in terms of trying to create an optimised outcome. But safety is the most important. That goes back to it.
I had a conversation with somebody from the division, asked him to come down to Morayfield Road, which is a strode, state-owned, very unpleasant place. And I just said, yeah, so 6 seconds to cross that street. Imagine being a little old lady. And he went, oh, I never thought about that.
I don't know what the standard is off the top of my head, but let's just say 6 seconds of green is the standard. Remembering a standard has always changed. So if there was, say, a retirement village or nearby, often they will consider that and they might change that and extend it. But I'll go back to the differences between vehicles and pedestrians, that with vehicles we measure them and the system adapts. And so it measures the demand of the vehicles, and it can even measure if the vehicles are travelling slow across the stop line, and you can configure congestion routines that will then push for more green time if they're travelling slower. None of that added functionality is available for pedestrians in the main. Like I said, for example, I used the example of Adelaide, that is measuring the pedestrians walking across. And so if those detection technology was there for the little old lady example, she was crossing across there, it would sense her and then it would give her a service that she requires. I try to bring it back and emphasise the technology side of it, that we should be more hungry. Technology quality for pedestrians and for cyclists to match that of vehicles to allow the system to give a service. Because the traffic signal system, unlike just a priority road or somewhere where there's no technology, traffic signals are a technology system. They are a robotic system. That robotic system in Australia, it's an adaptive system. It responds to what it measures and what it's told. And so when you improve the measurements for pedestrians, you get a better service that fits the requirements, be it somebody who's really fast and can cross the intersection really quick, or somebody who is otherwise challenged to walk across their slow. I walk with a limp, so hey, I'm somebody who fits that bill. The traffic signal system know that if it doesn't have eyes, sensors to be able to see it.
So we're going to wrap up there. Is there anything else you would like to add before we close out?
I'll just go back to sort of something that we talked earlier and just push people to see the opportunity of traffic signal systems, because we're talking here about wanting change and what we just talked about, and traffic signal systems are a way that change can happen at scale very quickly. We create a different, with technology that has to be installed in every site, but the way that the traffic signal works, there's few ways that change can happen at such a scale as with traffic signal systems. They're a huge opportunity to reshape the way we experience cities. And that is super exciting. And so, yeah, encourage everybody to think of that opportunity.
And it sounds like some good changes are coming soon.
They are, definitely.
Yay! Okay. All right. Well, on that note, thank you so much for coming on. It's been much more interesting than I had expected. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Wendy.
Every episode starts with someone's curiosity, and transport is full of people quietly solving fascinating problems. If you know someone whose work should be shared, or if there's a topic you'd like us to unpack, send us a message. Your idea could inspire a future episode. That's Streets and People. Thanks for listening. You can find more at getaroundcaboolture.au.